Welcome back to Conspiracy Theories and Chill. Today we're going to discuss the research facilities located at Plum Island and the possibility that the United States government created and then, whether accidentally or intentionally, released Lyme disease onto the American people. Now, this is a complicated issue, and I want to go in depth in a way that makes it accessible to everyone. So I'm going to briefly explore Lyme disease itself to get the conversation going. Now, what is Lyme disease? Well, Lyme disease is a bacterial infection that you get from the bite of an infected tick. And the first symptoms is usually a red rash, which may look like a bullseye. And other symptoms include fever, headache, body aches, a stiff neck, and fatigue. Fatigue's a big one. Lyme disease can be hard to diagnose because many of its symptoms are like those of the flu and other diseases. And you may not have noticed a tick bite. Your healthcare provider will be glad to look at your symptoms and medical history to figure out whether you have Lyme disease, but they will put you through a barrage of expensive tests. And they'll put you through every test until that test because they don't want to give you that test because that test is the most expensive test. They want to put you through every other test before they get to that one. And the lab test may not even always give you a clear answer, even the expensive one. Antibiotics can cure most cases of Lyme disease, but when I say cure, I really only mean on the surface. You always have it. The sooner treatment begins, the quicker and more complete the recovery is. But even after treatment, some patients still have muscle and joint aches and nervous system symptoms. This is called post-traumatic Lyme disease syndrome, for lack of a better term. Long-term antibiotics have not been shown to help with PTLDS. And that's pretty much what you hear from people who have Lyme disease. Constant pain, nerve damage, fatigue, etc. And all that's permanent. Now let's look at the facility at Plum Island and look into what they do there and why anyone would think that they were responsible for creating and releasing Lyme disease on the public in the first place. Well, the Plum Island Animal Disease Center is located on Plum Island off the coast of Long Island in New York State. It opened its doors and began work in 1954 under the leadership of Erich Traub, a Nazi scientist that we brought to America during Operation Paperclip. Traub worked directly under Heinrich Himmler, performing biological warfare experiments for Adolf Hitler. Coincidentally, if you believe in those, a method Traub claimed to have perfected was using ticks as transmitters of weaponized viruses. Anyway, he helped to do horrific things to countless innocent people. He's a literal mad scientist. And despite all of that, we brought him here to work for us and put him in charge of a biological weapons research facility off the coast of Long Island. Now, Plum Island's purpose was to develop biological warfare to be directed against animals in the Soviet Union now that the Cold War and conflict between the U.S. and the Soviet Union had begun. The Long Island daily newspaper Newsday earlier documented this biological warfare mission of Plum Island in a lead story on November 21, 1993. Investigative reporter John McDonald wrote, "A 1950s military plan to cripple the Soviet economy by killing horses, cattle, and swine called for making biological warfare weapons out of exotic animal diseases at a Plum Island laboratory, now declassified Army records reveal." A facsimile of one of the records, dated 1951, covered the front page of that issue of Newsday. The article went on to say, documents and interviews disclose for the first time what officials have denied for years, that the mysterious and closely guarded animal lab off the east coast of Long Island was originally designed to conduct top-secret research into replicating dangerous viruses that could be used to destroy enemy livestock. Now, of course, as you have probably already guessed, that's not what they say their express purpose is. They portray themselves and their work at the facility in a very different way. Have a look.
A place that's off limits to most of us was in the news this past week. The federal government announced it has granted a license for a new foot and mouth vaccine, a vaccine developed at the Plum Island Animal Disease Center. With correspondent John Miller, we get a rare inside look.
Plum Island sits at the end of New York's Long Island like a question mark. For nearly 60 years, controversies and mysteries have engulfed it. And no wonder. The island is controlled by the Department of Homeland Security. Its labs are staffed by scientists from the United States Department of Agriculture. They come and go by special government ferries, guarded by armed officers. We were asked not to film the docks on either side. So what really goes on here? The USDA says scientists study diseases that can affect livestock, primarily overseas, to develop vaccines. And although the government says the germs stored on the island affect only animals, that doesn't mean they're not dangerous. And information about them is strictly protected for security reasons.
I cannot comment on our list of pathogens and the inventories and all those things, or things that are sensitive information.
Marvin Grubman, a microbiologist, and Luis Rodriguez, a research leader, work for the Agricultural Research Service, an arm of the USDA on Plum Island.
It used to be a battery for the Army before the First World War and into the Second World War.
But the idea was, I think this island was going to protect New York City from invading armadas.
Right.
So today, why is Plum Island still guarded like an armed camp?
Post 9/11, security in the U.S., of course, and around the world has increased because of the potential threat of the bioterrorist weapon. So since we work with diseases of animals, it's in the U.S. interest not to allow potential terrorists to come in here and obtain the virus and distribute it around the world.
Is that the far-fetched plot line of a novel? Maybe not. When Afia Siddiqui, an MIT graduate working as a scientist for Al-Qaeda, was captured in Afghanistan in 2008, Plum Island was on a list of targets she kept.
What is so important about the work here?
Well, the majority of the work is focused on foot and mouth disease virus. And foot and mouth disease is an economically important disease. So, for instance, the outbreak in 2001 in the United Kingdom resulted in the slaughter of millions of animals and the loss of billions of dollars to the economy. And also,
microbiologist Grubman has worked on the island for some 36 years. He was evacuated during an outbreak in 1978 of the highly contagious foot and mouth disease, formerly and perhaps more aptly called hoof and mouth, which overwhelmingly affects cattle.
There was construction going on the island, and there was a release of virus from the laboratory. It never left Plum Island and never reached the mainland.
Back then, animals were kept outside in pens, as seen here in the CBS footage. When the virus escaped, it quickly spread from one animal to the next. More than 200 animals had to be killed.
An accidental release of pathogens.
A vocal critic of Plum Island is Michael Carroll, who detailed his reasons in his 2004 book.
The USDA's record in running it, how are they doing?
Somewhere between dismal and abominable. Their record is really a record of mishaps, outbreaks, people getting infected.
After the 1978 outbreak, biocontainment facilities, that's sealed laboratories and holding cells, were built, and all animals moved inside. These pictures were taken by CBS in 1999. Here's Luis Rodriguez explaining biosafety procedures.
In this case, the primary container is the tube, and the secondary container now is the biosafety cabinet.
But just 5 years after that, there were 2 more outbreaks, this time inside the island's biocontainment units.
We have learned from those lessons, so there is a lot of procedures. It's like an onion where you have layer over layer of safety procedures.
The Department of Agriculture says Michael Carroll hasn't been on the island in a decade.
One might argue you're not current. You don't know exactly what the changes are. Do you reject the idea that it could have gotten much better?
I do, because I think there have been a bunch of what I would call facade improvements, but in reality, I think it's the same place it always has been.
The very history of Plum Island, a post-World War II Army biological weapons lab, the decades of secrecy, and today's tight security all seem to conspire to feed the rumors about what really goes on here. The less that was known, the more people invented. Stories like that of the Montauk Monster, a creature spawned in the lab that escaped into the sea. Rumors about alien experiments. But the most pervasive story is the one about Lyme disease. Carroll, a lawyer who admits he has no background in science, contends in his book that it, quote, appears to be an inescapable truth, unquote, that Lyme disease was fostered on Plum Island and spread. Marvin Grubman, who's been a microbiologist on the island for decades, says it's not true.
There's no scientific basis for suggesting that Lyme disease originated on Plum Island. In fact, scientific evidence indicates it did not.
Lyme disease experts agree.
Derlin Fish, who's the Lyme expert at Yale, has looked at your conclusions and said he should stop making these things up. It just scares people.
They were researching hundreds and thousands of hard and soft ticks, and at the same time, an unknown bacteria has found its way into the mouth of the Connecticut River in Old Lyme, 10 miles away, where tens of thousands of birds fly.
In fact, a person can only get Lyme disease when a black-legged tick infected with a very distinct bacterium attaches to the body and passes it on. Researchers insist that neither the black-legged tick nor the Lyme disease bacterium were ever even at the Plum Island facility.
It is, however, what was exposed through the release of classified documents to be what the purpose of the research being done was at Plum Island. And in these released documents and files, you find a description for a virus that suspiciously resembles all of the traits of Lyme disease. So what have we learned so far? Plum Island is founded and ran by Erich Traub, a former Nazi mad scientist, with the purpose of creating dangerous biological weapons and viruses that would be spread through various means, including through the water supply, through the air, and through the use of infected ticks and other biting insects. This is not looking good so far if you're the type who doesn't like to think that the government would do something like infect the public with a weaponized virus for which there is no known cure to this day. So they were doing exactly the type of research on the type of viruses that could become Lyme disease. They were continuing Traub's work with infected ticks, and those are both really good reasons so far for thinking that the government may have been responsible. But is there more tying Plum Island to the outbreak of Lyme disease? Turns out yes. The area that the outbreak of Lyme disease has been traced back to is a 40-mile radius around, you guessed it, Plum Island. So what I'm telling you is that there exists a facility that operates in these United States that more than likely created and released Lyme disease on the public. Whether by accident or on purpose, the evidence is overwhelming. So it's likely that they were responsible, but since it's the U.S. government, we'll never know for sure. No real investigation will ever be done. Nobody will be held accountable. And all of that is very unfortunate. And the only way to do anything about that is to spread the truth. Spread the truth about Plum Island. Share this video with your friends and get the truth out there about this facility. It still exists, and they're actually trying to move it to Kansas. So let's look at what else Plum Island is known for. Lyme disease has got to be the worst thing, right? Well, I wish it was. But there is a large amount of evidence that aside from engineering biological weapons, scientists at Plum Island were experimenting with genetics and maybe even cloning as well. A nearby beach to Plum Island experiences an odd phenomenon of creatures that cannot be identified washing up on their shore. Now this has been reported on multiple occasions.
July 2008, Long Island, New York State. It seems like an ordinary summer's day in the small holiday town of Montauk, Long Island. A group of friends take a walk along the shore. Little do they know, they're about to make a gruesome discovery.
And we were looking for a spot to sit, and we saw a bunch of people huddled around. We didn't even know what they were huddled around, so we walked over to see what it was, and we saw this dead animal. What is this thing? Wow. My friend Rachel had a camera. I said, Rachel, let's take a picture of this thing. It looks crazy. It was about the size of a small dog.
It was hairless, but it had patches of hair, and then it had like a long dog tail. And then the head of it, which was where it was really weird and what astonished everyone, was like it had like a beak. It looked like a bird's beak or like a pterodactyl's beak, you know, like some kind of like reptile bird type thing.
The other funny thing was the fingers. They were like long fingers, and they were just strange looking.
And then it had like a tether around its arm, so it looked like it was tagged or had like a little like collar or something on its arm.
The snapshots taken on the beach that day inspire people around the world to try and identify a creature that has become known as the Montauk Monster. 2 weeks later, local journalist Kitty Merrill breaks the story.
It was disgusting. It was really gross. And, you know, people in the media do tend to have a dark sense of humor from time to time. We blew it up, we shrunk it down. We didn't put the boss's head on it, but it was close to that. So we messed around with that for quite some time before we actually started to work on anything. But when we first wrote it up, we did it in kind of a humorous manner, and we really didn't draw any conclusions or come to any kind of a conclusion other than, ew, look what somebody found on the beach.
The Montauk Monster becomes the talk of the town, and everyone has a theory about what it is.
The Montauk Monster has emerged.
Once again.
Once again. This is kind of freaky, man. This thing, I think, exists. I mean, there's still a question of whether or not it's real or fake, but it's scary. It's a scary-looking animal. Apparently, it smells really bad. It's always found in New York for some reason, Long Island Beach.
And that's why it's the Montauk Monster. They found one last year. They found one this year. This is it. Now, I look at that picture and I think, yeah, it smells because this is going to be the picture from last year.
Oh, that's so disgusting.
Look at that beak and then the paw and stuff like that.
And it looks like it's been roasting in the sun.
Right. The first picture, the one from this year, I felt like, yeah, it smells because this is a bloated dog carcass that washed up on the beach, right? And somehow it lost its head or something, right? Well, this is the last year's picture where you can clearly see the head. But then you see the video, and you're like, oh. I was positive that this was fake, right? Mm-hmm. I look at that, and I think, yeah, it's easy. It's a dog, da-da-da. If you do something crazy with the head, you're fine, right? But you got the video, Jesus? Okay, we're going to show that to you in a second. And the video's a little bit more creepy. Now I'm beginning to think maybe it's some sort of genetic experiment gone wrong / sea creature.
But why does it even have to be a genetic experiment gone wrong? Maybe it's just an animal that we hadn't discovered before.
It's possible. I believe in evolution.
Mr. Evolution all the time when anybody gets a long fingernail. Evolution!
I know.
Okay, all right. No. I think it's possible. It's just a strange creature we haven't seen before. So let's check this out.
Oh, they're big teeth. They're like people's teeth. Can you pick up the head again? That's really weird.
It's like people's teeth. Look at that.
That's what's fucked up about it. Oh, it's so weird.
Unless like the fangs and the front and stuff.
Yeah, it does look like human teeth.
Yeah, but still, those teeth in the back, they ain't like humans. You know, these things are like molars. Yeah, in the back, they're a little more jagged.
Pick up that foot right there. It's like matchsticks, the fingers. They're just dangling. It's so weird.
Like a chicken claw.
Yeah. It's really odd. Let's see the other hand. If they look identical.
Paw, whatever the fuck.
Yeah, the paw. Jesus Christ. Could be an alien.
No, it can't be an alien.
I tell you, it looks like a Montauk Monster.
Worst fucking thing on the
Jeez, Mike, show the head. What's underneath that skull thing? Is that the brain?
Yeah, the head's messed up.
That's really weird.
That's not there's no way that's a dog carcass.
Yeah, well, look, it could still be fake. Maybe they put it together and they shot it cleverly, and then later they're going to be like, oh, you guys all bought it. We did it. I hate stuff like that. You know, some people have the theory that it's some sort of genetic experiment that's going on somewhere in Long Island, and then you know, washes up. And then I think they took this one to a cooler to keep it cool, and they won't turn it over because they think the last time we turned it over, they made it disappear.
Right.
Think about it. Think about it, okay? Or it could be some sort of strange sea creature. Those are the three possibilities in my mind.
I'm actually kind of hoping it's a strange sea creature.
Me too. Yeah, that sounds fun.
Now that all sounds like National Enquirer stuff, and I'll give you that. But when you factor in a Nazi mad scientist, is anything out of the question really at that point? Hitler had scientists like Traub, and probably even Traub himself, doing just those kind of experiments on animals as well as people. It is not outside the realm of possibilities or even the imagination of what our government, the same government that has dropped 2 atomic bombs, mind you, are capable of. What if these unexplainable creatures really are cast-out experiments gone wrong? Like I said, the facility was exposed. They had to release documents, etc., and they claim that this research stopped. They claim that they research only for the benefit of society and to make healthier animals now. But they claimed that in 1954 as well. And until they were exposed, they did God only knows what in this research it was proven they were actually conducting. We only know, and not even for sure, of one thing that they created and released: Lyme disease. How many other diseases and viruses came out of their research? Evil incarnate, Henry Kissinger once said that you control the food, you control the people. Imagine the power in being able to unleash a virus that wipes out herds of cattle, the power in being able to starve people out. Now ask yourself if they're already doing it. If they can, they probably are, and they can. So in all probability, they are doing just that all around the world. It's horrible that we have to think those kind of things about our own government, but they have really given no reason to have faith in them at any point in time. They have a history instead of deceit in their dealing with the American people. They have repeatedly been exposed to be nothing more than liars and propagandists. They own the media, and they feed us disinformation through it to keep us dumb and misinformed. Our food is fake, our money is fake, and reality is sold to you on television completely fake. The only way to fight back is by spreading the truth. That is all that will bring down the lies. The truth will set us free. So share videos like this and get the truth out about our government. Teach people what they are really capable of based solely on what we can prove that they've already done. Think about all that we don't know. Thanks for watching, and if you shared, thank you. Remember to like the video and subscribe to stay informed when we post new videos. See you next week for a brand new episode of Conspiracy Theories and Chill from me on Things and Stuff.